What is one skill everyone should learn, regardless of their career? Story 1. How to do research, like actual research. Inevitably, something is going to come up in your life that you're going to want or need to learn about, above what Google and YouTube tell you, though those are absolutely valid places to start. Most people know how to use Google. Actual research isn't really any harder or different. It just takes a tiny bit more effort. Answer. I think the way in which you think about something has a lot to do with this too. I was raised pretty stupid, very religious, conspiracy theories were accepted facts, etc. And in my later teens started to lean into that crap even more and more, and looking into it all more online. At first, I believed even more BS, but somehow it got to the point where I just realized that the source of information matters so much. Some anonymous person on a forum saying a thing, and that thing being validated by other anonymous people believing it even with no evidence, does not make it true. That changed my entire life, honestly. Now if I could only figure out how to get my family to have the same epiphany. Story 2. Basic car maintenance. You don't have to do your own oil changes, but you should know how to do oil changes. You shouldn't wreck your suit changing a tire. That's what roadside assistance is for. But you should know how to change your tire. Story 3. Be genuinely interested in other people. Have a whole conversation by asking questions instead of seeking an opening to talk about yourself. And actually enjoying that conversation. Story 4. Public speaking. You'll need it for interviews, presentations, or just not sounding like an idiot in meetings. Story 5. Letting things go. You will live such a more peaceful life if you don't hold grudges for every little thing. There is so much shit in life out of our control, so stop worrying about it. Story 6. Don't be a male body part. Whatever the skill is that allows a person to exist and interact with others without being one. Story 7. Writing skills, reading comprehension. It's astounding how many people are absolutely awful at both. There aren't too many jobs where you don't have to write something to communicate or read instructions. Story 8. How to seek understanding before responding or reacting. I spend way too much time dealing with people who go into attack mode as if everything that happens specifically to inconvenience them. They don't spend even one neurons firing to consider that there may be a reason things happen. Story 9. Basic first aid. I'm alive today because I live in an area the ambulance takes too long to arrive, or they cannot even get there. So most people know the basics. Had even 5 minutes gone by, I would not be alive. Story 10. Learn to respect others. It seems that no one ever says thank you or say anything nice to anyone these days. Story 11. CPR. Your work might even pay for the training. It's super useful. I have a bunch of FEMA and Red Cross certifications for emergency situations, as well as CPR certification and a bunch of other random stuff I can't remember because my work offered them, so I took them. Most are useless but look great on a resume. Story 12. People skills. Being able to be likable, interactable, and easy to approach and get along with. People that are mediocre at best at their job can stay working at the same company for years if they have these work well with qualities. Whereas people who are absolutely stellar at their job but nobody likes them never work out well. Story 13. Unbiased observation. It's a skill that will allow you to learn every other skill or whatever, even if you have no trainer. Observing how things work and react, and being able to apply all of that anywhere, is the most flexible skill you could obtain, IMO. Story 14. Public speaking. This is especially true for the introverts out there and people who ramble. Check out Toastmasters. It will literally transform your life. Story 15. Minimal computer navigation. At the very least, how to navigate a computer. Learn where to store your files and fix basic problems with your computer. Your phone or tablet can only hold and do so much. Story 16. I always say, everyone should learn at least the basics of vehicle maintenance. Most people in the U.S. own cars, and you'd be surprised how many people barely even know how to put gas in it. Story 17. How to use tools and do basic DIY. It's scary the amount of young adults can't do the most simple of home repairs themselves. Story 18. How to cook, how to clean, how to manage money and taxes, how to pay bills, although that technically is managing money. Story 19. Personal finance and budgeting. And in relation to that, Excel. Even if you don't work in finance industry, Excel can still helps in crunching number when budgeting. Can also double as task list. Other alternative is old school paper, pen and calculator, which is simply inefficient. Story 20. Learn to have self-worth for yourself to avoid people treating you like crap. Make sure to avoid being people who try talking to you in a condescending manner. Those people try to dim your light and control you. Best thing you can do is say, I don't appreciate being spoken to that way. Call them out on their condescending behavior. Sorry for long message. It's just I've been through this a lot in life and relationships, always feeling behind or not good enough. Once I had enough and a horrible heartbreak, I turned to spirituality and learned to love myself and have self-worth for myself and learned more about it. It's made me stronger, more confident in myself, and avoid people who try to treat me poorly. Because you learn to, why? Why am I putting up with this? What for? Even at work, I ask them to repeat their comments if they feel off to make them realize not to mess with me. Self-worth is the best thing for any human to have and realize. I wish I had learned this when I was younger. Story 21. How to make their own doctor's appointment and know their own insurance plan. You wouldn't believe how many grown people still have their parents doing this for them. Story 22. Sounds dumb, but basic computer skills. I'm surprised at the amount of people that don't know how to properly search for things on the internet while also being safe online. Story 23. This is probably more for the people from US and UK who only speak English but learning some main languages, if only Spanish. We have a massive language ego in the UK. Schools should teach other languages from a young age. Wouldn't it be amazing if we were all bilingual? What is better than improved communication and comprehension? Story 24. Flint napping. It boggles me how rarely one comes across folks who can sit down on a stump and make a useful cutting tool out of a rock. Story 25. Basic self-defense. You hold yourself differently when you don't feel physically scared of other people. You enter into situations more confidently when you know you could defend yourself. Not Bruce Lee level, but the knowledge that you can hurt someone trying to hurt you or your loved one. Story 26. How to be good in bed. The world would be a much nicer place if everyone was getting laid and getting off regularly. Story 27. Most useful thing I've learned is how to look busy when work is slow. It keeps them from cutting your hours, and it can help keep someone from claiming you don't do enough. Story 28. Debating. Ironically, it's actually not of much importance if your career is an elected official, but everyone should learn to do it well. Story 29. How to use a computer. I'm talking basic knowledge, how to type, the different components and what they do, how the internet works. Stuff like this. Nobody should be typing with 2 fingers these days or clicking on pop-up ads. Story 30. Tying knots. Knots are tools and not all are used the same way. Good have a working knowledge of a couple that can be extremely useful. Story 31. Baking bread. Pretty easy. Smells amazing. Fun fact, a few years ago we were trying to sell our house and had a number of open houses. No luck. Before what turned out to be the last open house, I made it a point to bake some bread right before the open house started, so the smell of freshly baked bread filled the home. We got 3 offers that day, and the realtor said she would tell other clients that trick. The smell of freshly baked bread made our house smell like home. Story 32. How to balance a checkbook. Manage their budget. So few people understand the basics of that, it seems, and I see a lot of people really struggle at the start of their adulthood because they can't plan a budget at all. Story 33. How to communicate effectively. You can have the best ideas in the world, but if you can't communicate them, then the ideas are effectively worthless. Story 34. How to brush and floss your teeth. Your natural teeth are worth $1 million. No implants, no veneers, will have a quality and feeling and maintenance as easy as your real teeth. If you'd have to pay for them in advance, you'd treat them like your dream car. I was not brushing or flossing with enough thought for years. Didn't think dental check was necessary, and it cost me a fortune and a lot of pain to get them fixed. I am lucky to have only lost 1 molar, 2 root canals, and like 8 cavities. Story 35. How to do your own taxes. For the majority of people, your financial situation is simple enough that you should be able to file online on your own without paying a lot of money for a CPA or a place like HR Block. Story 36. Good writing skills, including grammar, word choice, as well as knowing how to adequately communicate a simple idea. Story 37. Some basic car maintenance services, an oil change, jump-starting swapping a dead battery, replacing a light bulb and changing a flat tire. Anything beyond that, such as fuses, transmissions, brakes, etc., is up to you. But those 4 specifically, plus keeping an eye on your fuel, can save you a lot of hassle. Story 38. How to answer a telephone. So many people of all ages seem afraid to. Public speaking. Being able to address a group with confidence is a learned skill for many of us, and you may only use it occasionally, but it sucks to be paralyzed when you need to do it. I know that's two things, but they're kind of related. Story 39. How to pick your nose just right so that you open up the airway but not enough to leave a tickle in your nostril that makes you sneeze a minute later and ruin all your effort. Story 40. How to dance. Invest in a basic beginner, then intermediate class, and for the rest of your life you'll have a real talent that is actually pretty impressive. My fave is swing dancing, but waltz, ballroom, salsa, etc. are fabulous as well. Story 41. Basic, and I mean basic, computer and writing skills. I can't believe how many people I cross paths with that don't have either. And no, a phone or tablet does not count. Story 42. How to change a tire. You do not want to be the loser calling AAA while your family sits in the car because you never learned how to jack up your car and release a few screws. Story 43. How to survive for as long as possible after getting lost. Have your car break down or be snowed in. Story 44. Everyone should know how to cook. It's essential in my opinion. I had to learn young. I know a few guys that have never cooked anything. I find that baffling. Story 45. Basic domestic chores, like cooking, electric things, etc. If you own a car, you must learn how to do mild maintenance tasks. Lots of people don't even know how to change a spare tire. Story 46. Advanced spatial awareness. In an increasingly crowded world, we all need to be aware of how our activities impact the flow of other people around us. Don't stop in the middle of the entryway to start planning your excursion. Story 47. Conflict resolution. Everyone should learn how to de-escalate situations and resolve conflict in a civil manner. Story 48. Critical thinking and organizing thoughts when you are writing, speaking. Works great for interviews, asking for pay raises, keeping calm in discussions, etc. Story 49. CPR. No matter the location you are in, there is going to be somebody in a medical emergency sometime in your life. Story 50. How to change a tire. It should be required as part of a driving exam. Taught my 3 children, now grown men and women. They have used this life skill even when abroad. My daughter changed a tire while vacationing on an island, as none of her friends, including the men, had any idea even where the jack was located. Sad. Story 51. Just one? Maybe a few like cooking, driving, swimming, CPR, and the list goes on. Maybe the first choice would be cooking. Story 52. Learning how to be dependable and manage your life to not forget things. I manage and work with a lot of people, and I don't care how smart or fast you are. What I want is to task someone and know they won't forget. And when I come back to it a few weeks later, it wasn't ignored or forgotten. Story 53. I love the 99 of these skills are things I am currently teaching to my 7-year-old. I found an age-appropriate financial literacy program, and she's in the process of learning how to sew and knit. She's also been helping out with cooking. She's currently being homeschooled via online school, and I told her she could have one elective that we could do on our own. She decided she wanted to learn those things, so I basically created a class for her that I have titled, How to be a Self-Sufficient and Productive Member of Society. Edit. I did not proofread my post the first time. Story 54. If you don't want to lose friendship or relationship with family members, try not to lend them money. Story 55. Cooking, cleaning, basic conversation skills, simple mechanics to maintain whatever vehicle you drive, changing oil, brakes, flitters, fuse, styres, and rotating them will save you nearly 90% of your maintaining costs unless a serious problem arises. Basic first aid, CPR. Story 56. Customer service, period, full stop. Everyone should work in a public-facing job at least once. Maybe then, everyone would stop being such assholes after they felt the immediate repercussions of their actions, tone, and behavior. Story 57. Oof. Picking one skill, fiscal responsibility. Other than that, some things I feel would have drastically improved my life if my parents taught me. Organization, emotional intelligence, cooking, cleaning, basic car maintenance, listening, basic survival, self-defense. I feel like I was grossly underprepared for life. Story 58. Boundaries. I'd also add communication, but boundaries first. I say this as someone who was always the quiet, dependable, super hardworking, sometimes 80 to 110 hours per week, and that's not a typo. Guy who always got in trouble whenever I deviated even slightly from that calm, quiet image. I get slightly irritated by something, straight to HR with a complaint about how I was rude or unprofessional. Meanwhile, the guy who's loud, brash, and assertive, who refuses to work more than 40 hours a week as a salaried manager, gets away with everything. Spoiler alert, I'm that second guy now. Not that I'm rude. I've always worked at being polite regardless of how quiet or loud, meek or assertive I am. But when you have a habit of standing up for yourself, pushing back against bullshit, and outright refusing to deal with rude coworkers and passive-aggressive behavior, people come to expect that they need to treat you with respect. Really helps with work-life balance and overall sanity. Story 59. If you have an office job involving computers, data analysis, relational databases, and programming in SQL, it's just very helpful to be able to think of data in terms of rows, columns, and tables. And being able to query data in SQL is way faster and more powerful than a lot of GUIs. Story 60. Basic computer skills. I'm a librarian, and the number of people we have coming in asking for help doing things like applying for jobs, renewing their driver's license, managing accounts, etc., because they have zero computer knowledge is staggering, and there are fewer and fewer non-online options for this sort of thing. Story 61. First aid. It comes up in the strangest situations, and even in non-life-threatening situations, knowing how to treat minor injuries is always handy. It's basically guaranteed that at some point, someone around you is going to have some sort of medical emergency, and having one person with that knowledge is the difference between life and passing, and two or more can be the difference between a full recovery and lifelong complications. You can save your own life too. I was surprised to learn that it's not a mandatory course for everyone in high school. I had to learn the basics in grade 9 and got my certification in college, and have needed it so many times despite only working in food service and marketing. Story 62. Reading comprehension. The number of grown jerk adults who can't understand basic instructions baffles me. Story 63. Public speaking. Even if you only ever need to meet a new coworker or the future in-laws, if you are comfortable enough, you won't have that meet a new person anxiety and maybe won't draw a blank. Story 64. Basic finance skills. How the market works, how investments and inflation work, how mortgages work, how interests work. Not only will it help a lot of people stay afloat, even if they're of more modest means, it will help a lot of other things like the political discourse. The amount of bullshit politicians get away with because voters have no idea what they're talking about. It's nuts. See, discourse around taxes. Story 65. Not a single skill, but a set of basic skills to keep yourself alive. Basic cooking, cleaning, grocery shopping skills are so important. Story 66. If you drive, some very basic car repair skills that mean you won't rely on roadside assistance. Changing a tire would be an obvious example. Or, on a recent road trip, in a friend's car, one of the wiper nuts loosened. I was able to fix that in a couple of minutes. We were in a remote rural location, and it was raining. Story 67. Basic handyman work. I mean basic. Changing the flush valve on a home toilet, grouting, caulking, lawn care, using wrenches, drills, operating saws, sawzall, etc. You know, basic life stuff, which, shockingly, a lot of my peers don't know yet or aren't comfortable doing tasks. And yes, I know how to do all this stuff. LOL. Story 68. Depends on where you live. But if you live in a pretty stable, politically, environment, learn a side skill job. Personally, I think working in restaurant, whether that's cooking or serving, too many people have misconceptions on how easy it is as a server, and yes, be learning to deal with public, which can be maddening and demanding. And as a cook, learning to actually cook, but also in a pressure-filled times environment, are skills you can't understand unless you do them. If you're in a politically unstable situation, learn basic survival skills, maybe hunting, etc., because you never know when all will go to shoot. Story 69. Speaking professionally doesn't need to be in public, but being able to speak in a proper professional way makes everything in life better. Story 70. How to read original sources. People get spoon-fed info as often are completely oblivious to the original text, specifically thinking about Christians who think that Jesus would be against supporting immigrants or supporting the poor. I recently told a guy to read the red words in the Bible after he said Jesus wouldn't allow food assistance for the poor provided by the government. Story 71. Cleaning up after yourself, holding a door for people, a proper handshake, the art of saying thank you, and making eye contact. Story 72. Basic car maintenance. You don't necessarily need to know how to do everything, but it helps to be able to identify potential issues when they first become noticeable. Changing tires, diagnosing electrical issues, changing oil, noticing when you need a tire rotation or alignment, etc. Story 73. Keyboarding, aka typing. I don't think there's a job in existence anymore where it doesn't come in handy, and being a two-fingered typist will only slow you down. Even in the trades, you end up filling out forms. Make your life easier. Learn to type. Story 74. Make fire. I'm not talking about using sticks or some caveman thing, but how to build up something that will ignite, keep burning, and grow. Story 75. Lear, what is money? How it is made? What happened in 1971? Understand the joke you of a system you are living, so you start investing as soon as possible. Story 76. History. You won't have a career if a government throws you in a ghetto after stripping your rights away. Story 77. Being able to do basic math in your head without a cash register telling you how much to give back. You wouldn't believe the percentage of people who can't make change without help. It's ridiculous. Story 78. How to ask for what you want clearly and directly. Most people hint, hedge, or wait to be offered something. The ones who get ahead just ask, not aggressively, just plainly. Can I get a raise? Would you introduce me to X? Is there a discount if I pay up front? Worst case, they say no, and you are in the same position you started. Best case, you get it because nobody else asked. You would be shocked how often the answer is yes, simply because you were the first person to actually ask. Story 79. This is kind of a cop-out, but outdoor survival. It's multiple things in one. How to hunt, cook, build a shelter, fish, trap, and how to forage. But I think it's still one of the best skills I've ever learned. I can spend months in the wilderness alone, even years if I really needed to. It gives a sort of confidence knowing I can survive no matter how bad life gets. Story 80. Budgeting. Learning how much you should reasonably have and how to track your spending to align with that number. Story 81. People need to learn how to dress themselves. Way too many people show up to interviews and shoot super underdressed. Story 82. How to operate basic tools. Screwdrivers, saws, knives, drills, pliers. Knowing this is very basic, and it's alarming the amount of people that don't know how to use them. I'm on a neighborhood group chat that we use to arrange gatherings. Talk about shifty people walking around and the occasional burglarization. A few weeks ago, someone asked for a screwdriver, and when asked what kind of screwdriver they needed, they were perplexed to find out that screwdriver wasn't just a blanket tool for any screw. Story 83. The most important skill that an extreme majority of people do not have is learning how to learn properly. Story 84. Basic automotive care. Know how to check and change your oil, check and add air to your tires, change a tire, replace fluids, replace fuses, jumpstart a car, and use a gas can. Also understand the basics of car anatomy. I'm not saying you need to know what a tie rod end is, but understand what a transmission does versus the engine, how front-wheel drive versus rear-wheel drive works, basic anatomy of the fuel system. Knowing how these types of things work helps us pinpoint a problem when one is occurring. Story 85. How to write clearly and stop using that darn sky comma for plural. Really, I work with MBAs that write so badly that sometimes I need to go to them and ask what they meant in an email. Oh yeah, and don't be a male body part. Story 86. How to unclog a toilet, how to read a map, how to change the paper roll, how to swim, basic first aid choking CPR, basic safety firearms handling, edited for hitting enter too soon. Story 87. First meal my ex-wife cooked me sailed through the air and hit the wall. You cannot cook without love, or your food will be like that poor chicken soup that stuck to the ladle upside down. She said it was so good, no it is not, and 30 years later she can still burn water and it tastes even worse. Story 88. Sales. I worked in sales for 13 years, but really, you're constantly selling or being sold something in almost every aspect of life. Story 89. Making more friends. Often life is competitive and working years go by with minimal true connections. But people can't forget true friends matter. Story 90. Basic troubleshooting. How to make a reasonable, testable hypothesis of the cause of a malfunction. A problem well stated is a problem half solved. Story 91. Every woman should know one of the grappling martial arts, judo, jiu-jitsu, sambo, wrestling, MMA, etc. Every man needs to learn humility. Story 92. Public speaking. It strengthens critical thinking, builds up confidence, and adds a ton of charisma. Story 93. Critical thinking. Specifically, the learned ability to distance yourself consciously from your biases and environment, to see things as objectively as pragmatically possible, to be distant from the effects of complex emotional factors, whilst being able to empathize with and understand them. Story 94. Sewing, cooking, basic decency towards fellow human, to at least manage getting through opening a bank account or getting through a public outing without a crash out. Math, probably. How to recognize temperature differentials so you don't blow the souffle. Like, why was that such a common trope in 90s cartoons? Or as John Mulaney pointed out, quicksand. Story 95. Getting along in the workplace. Soft skills, office politics, whatever you want to call it. There are very, very few jobs for someone to sit by themselves and produce on their own. Story 96. The skill to keep calm under stress. 99 of the world's problems would be solved if people would just chill. Story 97. Learn to read-write cursive. All of our founding documents are in cursive. There's a reason the teachers' union stopped teaching it. Story 98. Money-saving skills. Stop getting credit cards or applying for same-day loans. We need to go back to basics. If you don't have the money, don't buy it. Save up for it. Then if you still want it, go get it. So many people think there is nothing wrong with being in debt. So sad. Story 99. Organization and tidiness. A place for every item in its place. Your workspace, living space, and personal space will feel much more comfortable without trash and clutter. And knowing where everything is when you need it is efficient and convenient. Story 100. Mechanical aptitude. Being able to troubleshoot, repair, put together things can save you a lot of money. Simple things on your car, around your house, etc. There's so many resources available, and the more you do it, the better you get. It also gives you a better understanding of when you do need to pay somebody to do something if you're being ripped off. Story 101. Drive a car, and preferably just for experience, learn to drive a truck. Many people would understand the real issues when driving and would be more respectful and careful. Story 102. Swimming, and not to pick up and shake people who has been in an accident, unless it's absolutely necessary, of course. Story 103. Soft skills, interpersonal communication, and situational awareness. Learn how to read a room before you speak. Story 104. Humility. If it is your turn to clean the bathroom, you do it, even if it is bad and someone else's mess. You might not think this is a skill, but humility is definitely lacking these days. If you are working in a leadership position at work and you have first and second year apprentices, they should be asked to clean bathrooms and be fired if they don't. Story 105. How to wire outlets and other appliances like a ceiling fan, change a flat, any other basic housework. Story 106. Listening skills and communication helps big in making and keeping valuable friendships. Counseling skills courses are a good place to start. Story 107. The one thing I wish everyone would develop a sense of is spatial awareness. It's insane how many people in the world are just completely oblivious to everything going on around them. It must be nice for them to some extent, but it's a nightmare for people around them. Story 108. CPR. The rates of out-of-hospital cardiac arrest surviving are outrageously low, but having quick bystander CPR drastically increases the chance of surviving. It can save the lives of your families or random people. Also, mouth-to-mouth is not a requirement, as there is passive oxygenation and pre-existing stores of oxygen in the bloodstream. Hands-only CPR is incredibly viable. Story 109. Sharpen a knife. A sharp knife is a basic for work and food. So survival. Eliminate a cow for food knife, creating clothes knife. Get a multifunction basic Swiss Army knife with lockable blade, a great basic for any human, even pincher, available to get hair or plant needles out of your skin, plus canapooner, corkscrew, screwdriver, a big blade for slicing, and butter up your bread, clean afterwards, and even a toothpick, in the base model alone. Story 110. Troubleshooting. I built my career on fixing bugs. I can help people in other disciplines diagnose problems just by asking the right questions. I was briefly famous for fixing some long-standing bugs in Minecraft. Software engineering used to be 10 coding and 90 testing and debugging. Now with LLMs writing our code, it's 100 testing and debugging, and their code requires a hell of a lot of testing and debugging. Story 111. Driving a manual transmission stick-shift car. As someone who prefers to drive a stick as opposed to an automatic transmission, it never ceases to amaze me how few American drivers have learned this skill. Story 112. Typing. I was just talking about this to my daughter. I was always a fast typer, and when I was younger and didn't have a degree yet, this skill got me in the door to many places. Could be a little different now, but because of my typing skills, I've gotten accounting jobs and medical billing and coding jobs. I've worked in a lab in the past. They were willing to teach me the rest as long as I had the speed. Story 113. How to fight, boxing, BJJ, Muay Thai, whichever. You have no idea the confidence you gain in just 6 months, and dickhead and cowards notice that for some reason. Story 114. How to write with clarity. In the age of LLMs, it's even more important for us to not devolve into a species that cannot communicate coherently and needs to outsource thinking. Story 115. Emotional intelligence. You can have all the other skills, but if you have low emotional intelligence, you're going to have problems. Story 116. How to change your own darn tire on your vehicle, and how to check and refill all of your fluids. This is important information if you are to drive a vehicle, in my opinion. Also, how and how often to empty the dryer lint catcher. Story 117. Coding. It helps your mind think in a very advantageous manner structure. If-thens, variables, logic, etc. Story 118. I own a small business, and it always surprises me how many of the young women who work for me do not know how to change a tire. This puts them in potentially dangerous situations, so I always teach them how to do this. My dad taught me when I got my first car, and it's a great skill. Not useful all the time, but handy when you need it. Story 119. Critical thinking. The ability to look at a situation, take a moment, and determine what makes sense and what doesn't. I swear to God, this is a skill that seems to elude 90% of the world population. So many knee-jerk reactions, road rage, that generally lead to poor outcomes. Story 120. Basics of modern technology. Not expecting the everyday person to know how to code, but things like how to navigate your computer beyond just web browser usage. Open File Explorer, access settings control panel, what an address bar is, etc. How to check your vehicle, check fluids, tire pressure, when to change oil, etc. You know, the basic things that when you ask someone in their 20s if they can do X, you won't get the answer. How I do that? I'm shocked and disappointed when I'm trying to help someone over the phone do something as simple as go to the website www.thisisanexample.com, and I get a pause followed by, I don't know how. Where do I type that? Is that Google? And I realize I'm speaking to someone whose mental capacity is, ooh, I got a new TikTok follower. Better take a selfie. Story 121. How to read and understand what they are reading, or know how to find out how to understand. Exceptionally rare. Story 122. First listen, then thinking, eventually speaking, or the same when online with reading, thinking, writing. Story 123. Sales. Your entire life you're either buying something or being sold to. Job interviews, dating, politics, religion, court, etc. So recognizing how to persuade and when you're being persuaded are important. Story 124. How to sincerely say please and thank you. It may surprise you, but lots of people don't know how much of a superpower this is. In today's society, where so many feel they are entitled, expressing politeness and gratitude greases the wheels on all interactions and leaves a good impression. I didn't learn it until my mid-20s. Story 125. Critical reasoning. The ability to question if what you're seeing, hearing is bullshit, and along with it, how to dig for the truth. Holy shoot, is that missing like everywhere. Story 126. How interest works, especially for loans and credit cards. If only people could really appreciate how much it costs to not save up for something. Paying the monthly minimum is a trap that's wicked hard to get out of. Story 127. Putting themselves in the other person's shoe situation from a logical perspective doesn't have to be emotional. Story 128. Reading the table. From serving waiting tables, reading tables refers to the ability to accurately assess the vibes of a particular person or group within a single interaction, and to adjust your demeanor in real time to suit said vibes. Truly one of the most vital, versatile skill sets I ever honed. Story 129. Basic CPR training, Heimlich maneuver for adults and children, general first aid, and what to do in an emergency. Story 130. As someone without this skill for a long time, swimming. Everyone should know how to swim. I don't care if you live in the middle of the desert. Learn. Story 131. Keep your mouth shut at work. These people don't care about you, and they don't want your opinion, even if they ask for it. Story 132. Management skills. If you're good at the job, you will be placed in the position of being bad at your job. Story 133. Reading. I used to work as a cleaner and worked with refugees on a regular basis. Every once in a while, one would show up not knowing how to read. Annoying, but most of all, I would feel sad for the person. Story 134. Circadian rhythm watching and maintenance. It is the key to so many health secrets in modern humanity. My husband and I fix so many health and relationship issues just by fixing our circadian rhythms. It takes a protocol and intention, then execution of one's intention. Story 135. Using basic hand tools and reading a tape measure. Sorry, but I have learned at my job that a lot of fucking people lie on the application. Story 136. I really think everyone should learn how to communicate well. Unicate well. Like, not just talking or writing fancy emails, but actually listening, expressing yourself clearly, knowing when to shut up, LOL, and just getting your point across without making. Story 137. Lean Six Sigma. Everyone from bottom to the top being on the same page for a common efficiency mindset is extremely beneficial. Story 138. Curiosity is a skill. I know people who are practically walking encyclopedias about a wide range of subjects due entirely to their eagerness to learn. Story 139. Listening. Like, how do you anything well without taking in real-time data? If you think you alone represent the font of all answers, you're missing literally a whole world of solutions. Asking the right question is harder than it seems, but it's a skill that one can learn gradually, starting with listening. Story 140. Reading. Especially evident given the literacy rate in America, but being able to read opens up so much freedom for people. Story 141. If you can't cook yourself a decent meal as a full-grown adult, I'm going to consider you as a fudge idiotic, generally. Story 142. Keyboarding. Basic computer knowledge. How to set it up, et al. Basic manners. Critical thinking. How to build a fire. How to hammer a nail. Cooking. Basic life skills. Story 143. Critical thinking. And it's okay to realize you're wrong and change your point of view if presented with better, factual information. Story 144. One skill everyone should learn today is social media marketing. Knowing how to handle platforms, list products, and set up ads is becoming essential because updates and features change constantly across platforms. Even if you're great at your job like my dad, who's an amazing accountant, it's easy to get lost when trying to create something like an Instagram store. Learning the basics of social media not only helps you stay relevant, but it also opens opportunities to grow your personal brand or business, no matter your career. Story 145. Empathy. If only some people knew how easily they could have been in someone else's shoes, they wouldn't be so quick to judge then. Story 146. Marketing skills. How to make people want what you have, whether that be items you want to sell or skills you want a client employer to pay for. Story 147. Computer-related skills. How to properly use the OS and apps you use daily. How to reboot your computer. How to update it. Story 148. Cooking is, in my opinion, a new necessary skill. My sons used to complain about having to learn some cooking skills, but ended up with partners who couldn't cook. The ladies have some skills now, but... Story 149. Cross-referencing. So when you're problem-solving, you can sift through incorrect answers a little easier. More of a soft skill, but lots of people I've worked with don't do it well. Story 150. How to DIY basic repairs around the house. For the life of me, I can't understand people who pay good money to a plumber to repair a leaking toilet, or to replace the wax ring. The same with people who own RVs and cannot troubleshoot and repair things. I've repaired water heaters, furnaces, refrigerators, and leaking lines, and replaced toilets and sinks. Guys, I am female. One morning I heard the guy camped next to me and the campground host trying to troubleshoot the water heater. Finally, I walked over and asked if I could help, and the campground host snorted. So I taught the RV owner how to troubleshoot the thermocoupler with a multimeter, and when it did not have continuity, I handed him a replacement from my toolkit. Then explained to him the most common issues that can cause the thermocoupler to blow. His wife got to take her shower, he was a hero, and the campground host slunk away. Story 151. Personal Financial Management. What is an RRSP, TFSA, RESP, GIC, etc.? How does a credit card work? How to buy rent a property? How does compound interest work? Understanding tax avoidance. Basic understanding of the stock market. I am Canadian, so some of the terminology is different. I find it quite shocking how many people don't invest and instead let their money sit in a savings account earning 0.3 interest when SP 500 has an average ROR around 10 before inflation adjustment. Story 152. Customer service skills. How to talk to an angry person. How to get them to focus on the problem and start seeing you as their ally in addressing the problem, instead of just someone to vent to or bully around. No matter where you are in an organization, you will have customers, people who want things from you. Learning how to manage those relationships is critical. Story 153. Small talk. It's incredibly important to be likable and able to engage with strangers. Something as simple as your boss liking you to networking to grow your career. Small talk plays a bigger role than you'd think. Story 154. Cooking. Being able to feed yourself is a life skill. Swimming may be a distant second. You can just avoid water your whole life, but you gotta eat. Story 155. Basic cooking. You don't need to be a chef, but being able to feed yourself something other than instant noodles is a survival skill. Story 156. Basic budgeting. Basic mechanics, i.e., how to fix a car, change tires, get under the hood and understand how it works, how to cook and freeze 10 great-tasting healthy meals, maybe how to defuse a bomb, because, well, you never know, right? Story 157. How to talk to other people. Looking people in the eyes when talking to them, but without staring them out or appearing threatening. Trying to empathize with others so you can help them if they're asking for help or using a service you are providing. And importantly, what isn't okay with talking to someone else. Glances which read as being off. Getting out your phone and scrolling or looking elsewhere at machines when pretending to listen. How to not get caught up in an argument. Not being offended at every little thing. And not being offensive through carelessness or a sense of righteousness above others. And how to be sincere and polite. Essentially, how to exist in a socialized world and not be selfish or act like e.g., listening or taking a call on loudspeaker in a public place, or offering a seat to someone elderly or disabled when on a bus tube, or how to listen first, think second, speak third, and not always assume you are right or that everyone owes you a living. Not to assume it's fine to let your dog jump at someone because he only wants to play, he's harmless, before their dog has wrecked your coat because it has claws and jumped up with claws fully out. And no, the owner isn't going to take responsibility for allowing their animal to tear up your clothing. Just general socialization skills, which I see so many of all ages don't seem to have or bother to use. The number of people having full-on deep conversations with someone on a speakerphone always seems to be those who are at least 50, and especially elderly people. People I would have thought would know better. It seems that not being selfish isn't a given anymore.